We're recording.
All right, we chose to do Homeboy Industries. This is our group. She's Alicia.
Julie and Yvonne.
Okay, next. All right, so Homeboy Industries, they address the need of unemployment among ex-felons. Cost between 57 and 65 billion every year in the United States. And as of March, there was 130 inmates in 33 prisons across California. In California, 7 out of 10 minors will reoffend after their release, and of those minors, 1 out of 2 will be reincarcerated within a few years after, so it's a high recidivism rate. 75% of youth homicides are perpetrated by gang members. As you probably all know, there's a lot of gang activity in Southern California, specifically LA. 40% of blacks and Hispanics drop out of high school in California, and in impoverished areas such as parts of LA, the rate is higher. So what does HBI do? It helps men and women who have been incarcerated and possibly involved in gangs. The focus is on serving young adults who have been detained in juvenile systems. HBI, or Homeboy Industries, empowers the participants by fostering self-esteem, education, employment, and pro-social skills, which helps them avoid further incarceration and become productive members of society. Clients participate in an 18-month program, which they begin at any time. It's in Los Angeles County, and participants gain the skills necessary to become, as I said, productive members of society and avoid incarceration. HBI does this by providing them with individualized case management, which directs clients to appropriate services, including mental health, education, employment, legal, and tattoo removal services. So 100% of the participants are considered low income, which is defined as having $17,235 or lower a year annually. The ethnicity makeup at 62%, Latinos are the highest. Largest group being served, followed by a black at 30%, and then Caucasian and Asians at 4%. Gender, we got males at 72% and females at 28%. And age groups, the largest age group is 22 to 31 at 35%, followed by 18 to 21 at 28%, and then followed by 22% of participants 32 and older. And then we got the young guys, 14 and 17, 15%. Okay, the program inputs. The way it works, we got 10 case managers who oversee 30 to 35 clients each. Clients are seen by their manager 1 to 3 times a week to monitor services and make sure that they're getting the appropriate services and see how they're progressing. They meet with their therapist. Those who are attending mental health counseling meet with therapists once a week. They conduct 800 sessions of tattoo removal. And employment counseling is provided by volunteers each week, and legal assistance is as needed, and education depends on where they come in. If they're lacking GED, they receive those services, so on and so forth.
Okay, and the expected outcomes in how many people were helped. Homeboy employs and provides counseling services, educational, employment and anger management classes, legal assistant, and tattoo removal for more than 300 trainees each year. And how they measure it, based on a 6 different instrumental scales that I will discuss later on. But they are here listed: the Rosenberg, and then the Center for Studies for Depression, the PTSD, and the percent of clients expected to show improvement is 70% of the clients will show at least 20% increase in all the areas measured on based on the 18-month program. And how did you measure these outcomes? The clients will be assessed every 2 months during the program, during the 18-month program, and after completion, it will be 6 months. And like I mentioned, they'll measure self-esteem, depression, PTSD, group identification, the social provision, and problem solving will be measured. And then these are the measurement instruments. And the first one is the Rosenberg self-esteem, which is widely used and highly validates the self-esteem. And the Rosenberg is a 10-item measure that is scored on a 4-point scale that is anchored by 0, which is strongly disagree, to 3, which is strongly agree. And number 2 is the Center for Epidemiological Studies short-term depression scale. And they assess a recent depression symptom, and it's based on over 6 months. And number 3 is the post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's developed by an evaluation team. And number 4 is the 3-dimensional strength group of identification scale, which they measure the strength of group identification using 3 different but integral compounds, which they are cognitive, affect, and in-group ties. And number 5 is the social provision scales, which they examine the degree of which response social relationship provide various dimensions of social support. And the social provision scale is broken up into subscales, which is attachment, social integration, reassurance of worth, reliable alliance, guidance, and opportunity for nurture. And the last one is the problem-solving inventory, and it measures problem-solving and decision-making abilities.
Okay, so as Alicia mentioned, the different and the various assessing tools that we use are the data analysis. How we're going to go about doing that would be they're going to receive mental health counseling, and the purpose of that is to increase their self-esteem, to decrease depression, and then to decrease any kind of stress associated with trauma, because you know if they're in the program, first of all, they have trauma, and they have life-changing events that take place. So with the assessment tools that Alicia mentioned, those measure when they come in, and those would be some of the things that we'll see. So the receiving mental health, increasing self-esteem, the Rosenberg is used for that, and they just kind of go side by side. Decreased depression, there's the depression scale that's used to measure that, the decreasing the stress, there's the PTSD assessment, and then increasing group identity. That one is really kind of interesting because everybody identifies with someone or something, so that kind of really got into how they identify with others and where they're at. So it talks a lot about your internal social status, where you think you belong and where you fit in. Employment counseling sessions are definitely to increase aptitude awareness so that you know exactly where you are, and then job training. So those are the variables that we use independent, and then just kind of, compared them and lined them up next to the dependent variables. The three-dimensional, excuse me, strength group identification scale and social provisions. It was for the purpose of social integration, because these guys come through a program and they're not used to integrating with society, what we would foresee as the normal society. Their gangs and their incarceration groups. And evaluation design is, we chose the time series design, and the reason for that is because the time series design increases the validity, and it does that by increasing observations, because we would do assessments every 2 months. It's an 18-month program, so every 2 months of that 18 months, there would be an assessment done of the things that were previously mentioned on the previous slides. And then upon the completion of the 18-month program, they would return in 6 months, and they would be reassessed under all those things. And so that would be the data that we would use. So that would increase our validity. So then we didn't choose anything like a, and then also the isolates effects, like it would be kind of hard to say, well, he did better because he's, he did this, or he, had a tattoo removed, or, so it's a lot easier. It isolates the effect. Single group would definitely decrease the validity due to fewer observations being done. And the experimental, the randomized control group, which I actually always thought that that was kind of interesting, but in this case, it would demoralize the whole experiment only because in that community, they would talk to each other, they socialize with one another, and eventually they would find out who was getting treatment, who was getting what, and it would just not work. So that would be that. And then the validity threats being maturation, history, and attrition. Clients are definitely going to mature. You saw the ages that were involved. They mature and they make wiser decisions. You saw the age group that was higher in enrollment. Definitely, they're, as you mature and you tend to want things. They start having children. Some of them tend to want to start providing for their children. They just get older. They see life a little differently. Their perspectives change. So that's the maturation. And then the history, depending on like an economic impact. We had a recession a few years ago. I don't know how those guys did, at 18 months being in the program when you couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. So how are they gonna do when they can't, just get a job, picking up trash or something in a parking lot? So yeah, that's a validity threat. The attrition, clients will drop out. It is difficult to work on personal growth. A lot of these males and females, when they come through the program like this, they have to really dig deep. Homeboy Industries is not about putting a Band-Aid on, your social status there. What they want to do is they want to go in a little deeper and just really, lift you up and get you out there into personal growth, and that's a challenge. Testing. Clients definitely do better if you take a test. We can try that experiment for our final. Take a test, take it over, but see if we do better. But it would be, that's kind of the norm. You take a test, and when you take it again, you're just gonna do better. And then regression to the mean, being that if you start at one spot, I could have a great batting average and it could be, awesome, and then one day I'm gonna have a spectacular one, but more often than not, I'm just gonna kind of, I'm gonna average out kind of where I'm good and where I'm great. So that's, those are some of the other things.
So I'm gonna explain how they would be tested. For example, the Rosenberg self-esteem, as you see below, is every 2 months because that's when they will receive the test. And there was a dramatic increase throughout the 18-month. As they progressed throughout the program, so did the self-esteem, eventually averaging to the normal, which is normally about 15 to 25. In the depression, the improvement has shown that in depression scale with a decrease of 56.3 by the end of the 18th month program. There was a slight increase around the 14th month due to anxiety towards completion of the program, as you can see, but eventually it came back down. For post-traumatic distress, there was only a 10.5 in PTSD. This population is more likely to admit, would be more likely not to admit to their problems, and would like to appear in a more positive light. That's the reason why it was was not as dramatic as the other ones. For the group one, a gradual increase of 23.5 came from group identification. Their interaction with trainees contribute to forming bonds and pretty much figuring out that actually they do fit in. Problem solving inventory, the same, a gradual increase of 28%. Trainees that have shown an increase of problem solving skills have a higher opportunity of employment. And the last one, social provision, there was a gradual increase of 23%, and once the clients discovered that their coworkers' backgrounds are similar, they were able to be more open to it. And pretty much down as their it's kind of like an inverse between self-esteem and depression. As the self-esteem increased, their depression decreased due to the rise of the self-worth. They felt that they were effective in the community, and that's the reason why their self-esteem went up and depression went lower. And also in the increase in group identification allowed for the increase in social provision, which mirrors parallel growth in the problem-solving inventory. And the last one, PTSD, The PTSD, it identified PTSD triggers and associated with symptoms. PTSD did not increase as much. It went from 10.5. We predicted at least a 20% increase, which this is the only one that didn't do that. And it's because they project, because an increase as projected because it was only administered when symptoms were observable. And our recommendations are that we would find a similar program to compare to HBI. Unfortunately, there's none at this moment, but that's probably when we can compare both of them. And the last one, we would observe for a extended length of time. Instead of 24 months, it could be 3 to 5 years to see their progress. And how will we, make the program a little bit better? Pretty much providing the mental health counseling, prolonged exposure to therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, and or cognitive processing therapy, so they could address the PTSD symptoms and behaviors.
What made you guys choose them? Like, or what have you doing an internship there, or what have you done through the program, or?
I actually went last semester to see, because I heard that you would go, because they have a cafe. And when I went there, it was like, I didn't expect it to be a gourmet cafe. We all had an opportunity to go visit, and they had like food, like that normally they, is like lean food, I was like, when I ordered it, yeah, it was healthy, with some of them, not the bakery part. And that's how I started. So when we came up with the project, I was familiar with the program, but it was nice to see the opposite inside.
Cool. So anybody can go there?
Yeah, and they actually do tours. So all you can do is you could call and just say, can I get a tour? They'll walk you through the back. That's actually the majority of the things. When we were there were a lot of students from different states that they were doing it as their spring break.
Oh,
they were
wow.
just visiting, and they were calling it community service, and they were just going, taking pictures, finding out about different programs.
Yeah. If
They
you're ever in the
featured
area,
it on national TV too, so.
it's really interesting to stop by because then you see them at work, so you actually see the program like at work because they're there serving you and they're just, getting the job skills.
And when you normally would go to any other place to buy food, you would be a little bit apprehensive. And there you go in, and that's all you see, you tattoos all over. And we had an opportunity to meet Anthony. Later on, we found out that he was tattooed all over his face,
You would
and we
never
would have never
guess.
noticed.
Wow.
He approached us with a confidence. He made direct eye contact, and I can't imagine that. I don't know what he was like before, so I have nothing to compare it with. But I was impressed. So we were floored when he said, the tattoo. The doctor said, "What are we going to work on today, Anthony? Let's do something." And then he said, "Yeah, tattoos." And he said, "I had him." He said, and the doctor said his face was covered, and we're just like, "What?" So we started talking, having a conversation on the way back that had he not had those removed, maybe he would have been a little more apprehensive to approach us the way that he did, with the confidence that he did. But he did it, boldly, and But it would be interesting to see him also outside of that element too, So there's so many different things you can look at. But it was good. It was a nice experience.
Well,